The words on my coffee cup were written in black marker, right under my name. Not my usual name. Not Miles. Not even the misspelled Miles I'd been answering to for 3 months because correcting a beautiful woman before 8 in the morning felt like a crime. This time, under the cardboard sleeve, she had written 2 words. About time. I stood there in the pickup line of Brew and Bloom with a hot latte in my hand, a line of impatient commuters behind me, and absolutely no idea whether I had just been flirted with, judged, or gently sentenced. The barista watched me over the espresso machine like she'd been waiting all morning for my face to catch up with my brain. Then she smiled. And that was the moment I realized I was in trouble. My name is Miles Carter. I was 32 years old, worked as a museum exhibit technician, and had built a quiet little life out of careful routines. Same alarm, same gray jacket, same walk down Maple Street, same coffee shop, same order. Large oat milk latte, 1 pump vanilla, no foam. I never said the whole thing anymore. I just stepped up to the counter and she'd tilt her head, tap the screen and say, "The usual?" Like we were people who had a usual. Her name tag said Nora. Nora with the dark ponytail, green eyes, and a laugh that made even the milk steamer sound less aggressive. Nora who remembered everyone's drink but made it feel like she remembered something else about me too. The way I always had museum dust on my sleeves. The way I pretended not to check my phone when I was really just trying not to stare at her. For 3 months, I told myself she was just good at her job. That was safer. I was good at safer. A year before that morning, I had ended an engagement so quietly, some people at work still asked how the wedding stuff was going. My ex, Paige, hadn't done anything dramatic. No screaming, no betrayal, fit for a movie. She just looked at me one night and said, "Miles, you're kind, but I can't keep feeling like I'm knocking on a locked door." The worst part was that she was right. Since then, I had mastered being polite without being available, friendly without being known, present without ever leaning too far into anyone. Then Nora started drawing tiny leaves on my cups. At first I thought it was standard cafe charm. Then one morning she drew a dinosaur wearing a scarf. Another day, a tiny museum column collapsing under the words, "Need coffee before ancient history." I had laughed out loud in the street. Actually laughed. I nearly turned around to tell her. I didn't. Because again, locked door. That morning started like any other. Cold April air, wet sidewalks, my building's elevator making its usual concerning groan as I rode down from the 4th floor. A woman stepped in on the 3rd floor with a tote bag over one shoulder and damp hair tucked under a knit hat. I'd seen her before, of course. Apartment 3C. Soft perfume, quick smile, always carrying either flowers or laundry like she was on her way to rescue a very small wedding. We'd exchanged maybe 20 polite nods over the past few months. "Morning," she said. "Morning," I said. That was the full extent of our hallway intimacy. She looked familiar in that half-lit elevator, but my brain filed her under neighbor, not woman who controls my caffeine and possibly my emotional future. Then she got off on the ground floor, turned left toward the back exit, and disappeared. 10 minutes later, I walked into Brew and Bloom, and there she was behind the counter. No knit hat now, hair pulled back, black apron, name tag. Nora. Apartment 3C Nora. My neighbor Nora. My barista Nora. My mind did something embarrassing. It didn't shut down exactly, it just opened 17 tabs at once and froze. She looked up, and I knew instantly that she knew. Not just knew me, knew I had finally figured it out. Her mouth curved. "Well, well," she said, tapping the register. "Good morning, 4B." I stopped walking. The man behind me almost collided with my shoulder. "You knew?" I asked. Nora's smile widened. "That we live in the same building? Yes." "For how long?" She leaned one elbow on the counter. "Since you held the lobby door for me in February while balancing a broken picture frame and a tragic amount of takeout." I remembered that night. I'd muttered something about gravity being a personal enemy. "You didn't say anything," I said. "Neither. Did you?" "That's because I didn't know." "Exactly," she said. Like this proved a point she had been making in a private debate with herself for weeks. I should have said something charming then. Something easy. something that made me seem like a man who could handle a pretty woman discovering he had the situational awareness of a coat rack. Instead, I said, "So, you've been drawing dinosaurs on your neighbor's coffee?" Only the neighbor I like. The line behind me went quiet in that terrible way lines go quiet when strangers decide your life is more interesting than their own. My face got hot. Nora just turned, made my drink without asking, and set it on the counter between us. There it was. Large oat milk latte, 1 pump vanilla, no foam, and under my name, in bold letters, "About time." I looked up. Nora held my gaze, all teasing gone soft around the edges. Then she said, "So, Miles from 4B, are you going to keep pretending we're strangers? Or are you finally going to ask me why I wrote that?" The correct answer was obviously, "Why did you write that?" My actual answer was silence. Not thoughtful silence. Not romantic silence. The kind of silence where the person's soul briefly leaves the building and comes back holding nothing useful. Nora's eyebrows lifted. Behind me, someone coughed. Someone else whispered, "Ask her, man." That snapped me back. I picked up the cup, turned it slowly like the words might rearrange themselves into something less dangerous, and said, "Why did you write that?" Nora's smile returned, but smaller now, more private. "Because," she said, "I've been waiting to see if you'd notice." "That you were my neighbor?" "That too." My heart did something inconvenient. The shop was warm and noisy around us, grinders, spoons, chair legs scraping, morning orders called out in practiced rhythm. But for a second, everything narrowed to Nora's fingers resting on the counter and the little smear of flour on her apron. "You could have told me," I said. "I could have." She reached for a towel and wiped an invisible spot from the counter. "But you have this whole thing." "I have a thing?" "Oh, definitely." I braced myself. "What thing?" Nora looked past me at the growing line. "You move through the world like you're trying not to disturb the furniture." That landed so cleanly I almost winced. "I don't think furniture minds," I said. "No," she said, "but people sometimes like being disturbed." Before I could respond, a tall woman in a blazer leaned around me and said, "Some of us would also like being caffeinated." Nora laughed and the spell broke. "Go," she told me, nodding toward the pickup counter. "You're causing a traffic problem." "I'm not sure I should operate heavy machinery after this conversation." "It's a latte, Miles." "I meant my feet." Her laugh followed me as I stepped aside. I should have left. I was already late and my supervisor had the patience of a museum mummy. But I stood near the window with my cup in both hands and pretended to read an art fair flyer. About time. The words stared back at me. I had been noticed. Not in the broad, polite way strangers notice one another. Nora had been paying attention. To my order, my jokes, my apartment, my locked door habits. And instead of backing away, she had written me a note. When the rush thinned 10 minutes later, she came around the counter carrying a tray of blueberry scones. "You're still here," she said. "I'm investigating the meaning of public messages." "Any findings?" "Preliminary evidence suggests the barista is dangerously cryptic." "Dangerously?" She looked pleased. "That's going in my performance review." I took a breath. My fingers tightened around the cup. "About time for what?" Nora held my gaze. Up close, I could see faint gold flecks in her eyes. I could also see that she wasn't quite as casual as she was pretending to be. "For you to look at me like you actually see me," she said. The words were quiet. Not a joke this time. I didn't know what to do with the sudden ache in my chest. "I see you," I said. She tilted her head. "Now you do." That was fair. Brutally fair. I looked down at the cup, then back at her. "I'm sorry." "For not recognizing me without the apron? For moving like I'm trying not to disturb the furniture?" Nora's expression softened. "You don't have to apologize for being quiet. I've been told it can feel like a locked door." The words slipped out before I could stop them. Nora didn't pounce. She didn't ask for details or offer sympathy that would have made me want to bolt. She just nodded once like I had handed her something fragile and she knew not to squeeze. "Well," she said, "doors open." "Not always." "No," she agreed, "but sometimes somebody knocks in marker on a coffee cup." A laugh came out of me, small and startled. There it is, she said. What? That laugh. She shifted the tray on her hip. You do it when you forget to be careful. I had no defense against that. The bell above the door jingled and two customers walked in. Nora glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. I get off at 6, she said. My pulse kicked. Okay, I said, which was possibly the weakest response in dating history. She smiled anyway. Okay, as in useful information? Or okay, as in you're going to stand in your apartment later wondering why I told you that? I swallowed. Useful, I said. Very useful. Good. She leaned in just slightly. Then maybe stop by the roof tonight. 7:30. I'll be the woman you apparently see everywhere but don't recognize. Then she turned and walked back behind the counter. I left Brew and Bloom 5 minutes later with a cooling latte, a burning face, and two words still wrapped around my cup like a dare. About time. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel like going home meant hiding. It felt like I had somewhere to be. I spent the rest of the day restoring a cracked plaster cherub and pretending I was not thinking about the roof. This was difficult because cherubs by design look smug. By noon, I had checked the weather 3 times. By 2, I had searched normal things to bring to rooftop conversation and received no useful results. By 4, my coworker Priya stopped beside my workbench and said, "Either that statue offended you personally or you have plans." "I have a neighbor," I said. She blinked. "Most people do. She's also my barista." Priya set down her clipboard slowly. "Go on." I told her the least humiliating version, which still included the cup. When I finished, she smiled like someone watching a bird fly into a very clean window. "Miles, if a woman writes 'about time' on your coffee and invites you to the roof, that is not a neighborhood watch meeting." "I know that. Do you?" "Mostly." She patted the cherub's head. "Wear the blue shirt." So at 7:15, I stood in my apartment wearing the blue shirt, holding a bottle of sparkling lemonade I had bought because wine felt too bold, and showing up empty-handed felt like arriving to my own emotional audit unprepared. At 7:28, I climbed the stairs to the roof. Our building wasn't fancy, but the roof had its charms. String lights someone had hung years ago, mismatched chairs, a few planters with herbs that survived through spite. The city stretched around us in layers of brick, glass, and evening traffic. The air smelled like rain and basil. Nora was already there. She sat on the low wall near the planters, wearing jeans, a cream sweater, and no apron. Without the counter between us, she looked less like someone from my morning routine, and more like a person I had somehow been missing in plain sight. She turned at the sound of the door. "You came," she said. "I'm beginning to understand that was the assignment." Her grin appeared. "And you brought—" "Sparkling lemonade. Bold." I panicked in the beverage aisle. That's my favorite aisle to panic in. I laughed, and this time I didn't try to stop it. She had brought 2 paper cups from the cafe and a small container of cookies. "Day old," she said, still emotionally supportive. We sat in 2 weathered chairs angled toward the skyline. For a few minutes, we talked about easy things. The elevator's alarming noises, the man in 2A who practiced trumpet badly but with great confidence, the stray orange cat that treated the lobby like a hotel. Then Nora said, "So, museum exhibit technician. You remembered." "I remember everyone's order, Miles. I remember yours for other reasons." I looked at her. She leaned back in her chair. "You always notice details. The new painting near our mailboxes. When someone moves the cafe plants. The fact that my left wrist was wrapped for 2 days in March." "You burned yourself on the steam wand," I said, then realized how quickly I'd answered. Her expression warmed. "See?" I took a sip of lemonade to avoid looking too pleased. "I guess I notice things too. You just don't always let people know." There it was again. Not accusation. Observation. I turned the paper cup between my hands. After my engagement ended, I started thinking quiet was safer. Nora didn't interrupt. She said I was kind, but not open. Like I was always holding part of myself back. I stared toward the streetlights. I hated that because it was true. Nora's voice was gentle. Were you afraid of her? No, afraid of needing her, maybe. Afraid that if someone really knew me, they'd eventually decide I was too much work. The confession hung there in the damp evening air. Nora looked down at her cookie, broke it in half, and handed me a piece. For the record, your coffee order is more work than you are. I laughed, but something in my throat tightened. She smiled softly. I'm not asking you to throw the door open, Miles. I'm just saying I've been standing in the hallway a while. I looked at her then. Really looked. At the cafe, I said. You always seemed like you had a whole life happening in color. That's funny. She brushed crumbs from her fingers. I thought yours looked quiet in a way I wanted to sit beside. The string lights flickered on as the sky darkened, turning her hair copper at the edges. I'm glad you wrote on the cup, I said. I almost didn't. Why? For the same reason you almost didn't ask. Rejection is humiliating before breakfast. After breakfast, too. True. We sat there smiling at each other, ridiculous and nervous, and 30 feet above the street. Then Nora reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out a black marker. My eyes dropped to it. Should I be concerned? Only mildly. She took my empty paper cup and wrote something on it, shielding the words with her hand. Then she passed it back. Dinner? Under it, she had drawn a tiny dinosaur holding a fork. I looked from the cup to her. This is becoming a pattern, I said. Good patterns are routines with better lighting. I nodded, my heart loud but steady. Yes, I said. Dinner. Nora's smile bloomed slowly, like she had been hoping but not assuming. About time, she whispered. And this time, I didn't miss it. Dinner apparently was harder than rooftop lemonade. Rooftop lemonade existed in a glowing little pocket above the city. Dinner required logistics, a time, a place, clothing that suggested interest without screaming. I have been emotionally dormant and am now re-entering society. Nora made it easier. The next morning, my cup said, Friday, 7. No museum dust. Below it, she had drawn a tiny broom. I looked up from the message. Museum dust is part of my charm. It's part of your ecosystem, she said, sliding a croissant into a bag. But I'd like to meet you without a layer of ancient plaster. Demanding? You have no idea. All day Friday, I felt 16 and absurd. By 6:30, I had changed shirts twice. At 6:50, I was standing in front of my mirror, telling myself dinner was not a legally binding emotional contract. At 7, I knocked on 3C. Nora opened the door wearing a dark green dress and boots, her hair loose around her shoulders. For one stunned second, every prepared sentence vanished. She glanced down at herself. Too much? No, I said quickly. No, you look very recognizable. Her lips twitched. That may be the worst compliment I've ever loved. We walked to a little Thai place 6 blocks over, the kind with fogged windows and mismatched lanterns. At first, we were careful. We talked about favorite foods, bad customers, strange museum donations. She told me she'd moved to the city 2 years ago after leaving a graphic design job that had made her hate both graphics and design. The cafe was supposed to be temporary, she said, twisting noodles around her fork. Then I liked people better than fonts. That's a strong statement. Fonts never tip. I told her about the museum, about building invisible supports so fragile things could stand in public without anyone knowing what held them up. Nora rested her chin on her hand. That sounds like you. I paused. She winced. Too direct? No, I said. Accurate. The night loosened after that. We laughed more. Her knee bumped mine under the table and neither of us moved away. On the walk home, rain started falling in a soft silver mist and Nora pulled her coat over her head like it could negotiate with the weather. I offered my umbrella. She stared at it. You had that the whole time? I check forecasts. Of course you do, 4B. We walked shoulder to shoulder beneath it. Halfway down Maple Street, her hand brushed mine. Once, twice. The third time, I took it. Her fingers fit into mine with such simple rightness it scared me. That was when my phone rang. I almost ignored it, but the name on the screen stopped me. Paige. Nora saw something change in my face. You can answer. I don't have to. But you want to know why she's calling. I hated that she was right. I stepped a few feet away, rain tapping the umbrella Nora now held alone. Hello? Paige's voice came through familiar and strange. She was in town next month, she said, sorting old storage things. There were boxes with my name on them. Maybe we could meet for coffee. Coffee, of course. I said yes because it seemed easier than explaining why no would have been healthier. When I hung up, Nora was watching me with the umbrella tilted against the rain. Ex? She asked. Ex-fiancé. Her face stayed calm, but something guarded flickered behind her eyes. Ah. She found some boxes. Sure. Nora. She looked down the street. It's okay. You don't owe me an explanation after one dinner. That sentence should have relieved me. Instead, it felt like a door quietly closing. I don't want it to be just one dinner, I said. Her eyes returned to mine. The rain darkened her hair at the edges. Then don't disappear into your head and leave me guessing. It was not sharp. It was worse than sharp. It was honest. I thought of Paige saying, locked door. I thought of Nora standing in the hallway. She called and I said yes to coffee because I panicked, I admitted. Not because I want to go backward, I don't. I just have a bad habit of choosing the least disruptive option and calling it kindness. Nora was quiet. Was tonight disruptive? She asked. Yes, I said. Her expression fell. I stepped closer. In the best way. The corner of her mouth moved, but she didn't fully smile. I like you, I said, before fear could edit it into something safer. I liked you before I knew how much I liked you. And that phone call scared me because I looked between us, already matters. Nora exhaled slowly. Then she handed me back the umbrella. Good. Good? Good that it matters? She slipped her hand into mine again. But if your ex writes anything on your cup, I reserve the right to be dramatic. I laughed, relieved down to my bones. At our building, we stopped beneath the awning. Neither of us moved toward the door. Nora looked up at me. Miles? Yeah. I'm going to kiss you now unless you plan to be furniture about it. I'm done being furniture. Her smile was small and bright. Then she kissed me, soft as rain and twice as startling. For once, I didn't hold anything back. The next morning, Nora wrote nothing on my cup. That scared me more than about time ever had. She slid the latte across the counter with a perfectly innocent smile. Large oat milk, 1 pump vanilla, no foam. I turned the cup in my hands, blank. No dinosaur? I asked. Dinosaur's resting. That sounds ominous. He had a big night. My face warmed. Nora's smile softened, and just like that, the fear loosened. For the next 2 weeks, we learned each other in the ordinary places. She learned I folded grocery bags into small triangles because my grandmother had. I learned she sang along badly to old soul music when she cooked. She learned I hated olives. I learned she loved them enough to eat mine without asking, which somehow became one of my favorite things about her. But Paige's call still sat between us, even when Nora never pushed. So I met Paige on a Wednesday afternoon at a coffee shop that was not Brew and Bloom. She looked well, happier maybe. We exchanged boxes, talked. Politely, and for the first time, I didn't feel pulled backward. I felt grateful and sad and finished. Before we left, Paige touched the lid of her cup and smiled faintly. You seem different, Miles. I think I'm trying to be. For someone? I thought of Nora behind the counter, Nora on the roof, Nora in the rain calling me out before I could vanish. For myself first, I said. But yes. Someone helped me notice. Paige nodded. Then don't hide from her. It was the kindest thing she could have said. That evening I found Nora on the roof, watering basil in the blue hour. I met Paige, I said. She turned slowly. And? And I'm here. Nora studied me for one long second. Then she set the watering can down and walked into my arms like she had been waiting to see if I knew where home was. I'm proud of you, she whispered. No one had ever made those words feel like a kiss before. 6 months later, Brew and Bloom changed its menu board, and Nora's hand lettering filled the whole wall. She'd started designing again, slowly at first, then with color and confidence spilling across cafe windows, wedding signs, neighborhood flyers. I stopped being only quiet. I was still me, still careful with fragile things, but I learned there was a difference between protecting what mattered and locking it away. By the following spring, we had become the kind of couple our building pretended not to gossip about. Nora still lived in 3C, I still lived in 4B, but most mornings she left from my apartment with flour on her sleeve and my spare key on her ring. And every morning I stopped by the cafe, even on days she wasn't working, especially then, because it had become ours. The bell over the door, the warm smell of espresso, the little table by the window where she once caught me pretending to read a flyer, while my whole life shifted in my hands. One rainy April morning, exactly a year after she wrote those 2 words on my cup, I walked into Brew and Bloom and found Nora waiting at the counter in a yellow sweater, not an apron. "You're not working?" I asked. "Nope." "Then why are you behind the counter?" She lifted one cup and held it out. "Special delivery." My name was written correctly this time. Miles. Under it, in her familiar black marker, were the words, "Move in?" Below them, a tiny dinosaur held a cardboard box. I stared at it until the letters blurred. Nora's teasing expression trembled at the edges. "Too much?" I looked at the woman from the elevator, the barista who knew my order, the neighbor who had been standing in the hallway, brave enough to knock with a marker and a coffee cup. Then I set the cup down, reached across the counter, and took her hand. "About time," I said. Her laugh broke bright and soft, and when she came around the counter into my arms, the whole cafe disappeared. The noise, the line, the rain on the windows. There was only Nora smelling like coffee and vanilla, holding me in the middle of the morning, like I was not a locked door anymore, but a light left on for her. And this time, everyone saw. If you've ever had an about-time moment of your own, I'd love to know where it happened. What would you have done if something like, "My neighbor was the barista at my favorite coffee shop"? Then she wrote, "About time" on my cup happened to you? And have you ever mistaken kindness for something your heart was too afraid to name? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.